Commander Alara Tycho awoke to a chorus of dissonant hums and flashes of eerie, violet light. The last thing she remembered was the violent jolt of her ship's hull as it broke through the Draken blockade. Then nothing. Now, suspended in a web of luminescent restraints, she hung inches above a seamless floor that rippled like liquid metal. Every restraint throbbed against her skin, sending pulses of energy into her veins. She tried to scream, but found her vocal cords unresponsive. As though the very air around her was being siphoned away. Her vision cleared just in time to see them, the Draken executioners. Towering over her at least 7 feet tall, their spindly, insectal forms seemed almost fragile until you looked at their faceted eyes, which glinted with cold, merciless intellect. Their arms ended in 3 elongated, claw-like digits, each tipped with a device that scratched the air like a surgeon's scalpel. These instruments buzzed with alien power, ready to probe her mind and body. Through the neural interface embedded at the base of her skull, she understood their guttural thoughts, not that translation made them any less terrifying. They hungered for Earth's secrets, defense protocols, warp drive schematics, the location of hidden research bases. They would dig until they unearthed every fragment of her knowledge. A harsh beam of emerald light swept beneath her chin, lifting her head to force her gaze forward. Before her stood Zaire Ka, the Draken interrogator-in-chief. His 8-meter-long dorsal fin quivered in anticipation as a low, reverberating hum emanated from his mandibles. Alara stared back defiantly, even as sweat coated her brow. She would not give them the satisfaction of seeing her fear. "Tell us of the Atlanta Protocol." Ka's voice resonated inside her skull. "Or we will escalate." She clenched her jaw against the pain that flared in her temples. She thought of the thousands of crew members aboard the Astrea, depending on her to protect the galaxy's most advanced cloaking technology. To speak now would be to doom them all. Silence stretched until one of the Drakens stepped forward, slotting a slender probe into her left wrist. A searing shock ran up her arm as the alien device burrowed through skin and muscle, tapping directly into her nervous system. Her vision blurred, and she felt memories of her childhood on Caldo Prime, of her first promotion in the Imperial fleet soaked up like data by ravenous digital leeches. She bit her lip until it bled, but the pain only made her vision swim. Further hours drifted together. In one stretch of time, she was forced to relive every combat simulation she had ever commanded. In another, the Draken dissected her fears and doubts, trying to pry open the vault of her subconscious. The restraints adapted to her physiology, tightening when she resisted, loosening only enough to keep her conscious. Each day dissolved into the next in a haze of agony. Yet even in the darkest moments, Alara clung to slivers of hope. She spoke silently to herself, reciting the Federation's commendation speech, imagining the warm breeze of her home world's forests on her face, and remembering the look of pride in Lieutenant Jace Rourke's eyes when they had sworn to marry. These mental anchors kept her mind tethered to reality. On the 4th day, she noticed a subtle shift in the Dracon's behavior. Their questions grew more frantic, their probes more erratic. It was as though they were reaching the limits of what her mind could hold, or perhaps they feared something deeper, something they could not extract. Alara allowed herself a small, biting smile. Even in torment, she had managed to become an enigma dot by the 7th sunrise behind barred, bioluminescent skylights. Alara's strength was near spent. Her uniform lay in tatters, her muscles ached, and her thoughts came in fractured shards. Yet when Zaire Ka returned to the chamber, holding a fresh set of instruments, she lifted her chin. Pain might shatter flesh, but it could never fracture. Resolve so long as there was breath in her lungs. She would fight Dot as the interrogator's mandibles clicked into place. A sudden tremor rippled through the facility. For a heartbeat, the violet halls of questioning fell silent. Alarms began to wail, and emergency lights bathed the chamber in urgent scarlet. The Draken froze, their multifaceted eyes reflecting panic for the first time. Alara, suspended at the edge of unconsciousness, felt a spark of clarity and, for the first time in days, dared to hope that salvation was finally coming. Ilara's eyes fluttered open to find herself lying on a crystalline slab, suspended above a churning pool of violet plasma. The chamber's walls were carved from living quartz, veins of light snaking through them like wound arteries. Every heartbeat echoed in her ears as though the entire structure pulsed in time with her weakening pulse. Zyrka stood at the far end, his dorsal fin quivering with anticipation. Around him, half a dozen Draken guards watched in hushed reverence, an audience to her agony. The moment the restraints released their grip, artificial gravity reversed and twisted her body into a near impossible arch. Pain flared along her spine as bones threatened to splinter, but before she could scream, the Draken activated the next phase. From a recessed panel in the quartz floor, gravity anchors shot out, clamping around her limbs with cold precision. She was immobilized, sprawled out like a specimen on display. Above her head, a crystalline prism descended, splitting the pools. Violet light into shards that danced across her eyes. Each shard seemed to carry its own frequency, some that scorched the mind, others that rippled through her flesh like acid. Then came the questions. Zyrka's voice, amplified through the neural implant, resonated directly in her skull. Where is the command relay for Project Aurora? Name the coordinates of the hidden defense grid on Calistria 7. Activate the override codes for your cloaking arrays. Ilara's throat constricted around each thought. She had already sacrificed what she could half-truths and red herrings woven through her memories to buy time. Now she had nothing left to give. Every corner of her mind had been plumbed, every secret wrung out like sweat. As their instruments probed deeper, she felt her identity dissolve. The Dracon's devices monitored her brainwaves, isolating the emotional centers and flooding them with synthetic neurotransmitters. Fear warped into despair. Pain mutated into rage. Then both collapsed into a numbing void. Colors lost their edge. Sounds became muffled. They were chasing her mind into silence. Her only refuge was Ka's relentless cadence of questions. Each query felt like a hammer blow. She could not answer, and each moment of silence only fueled their fury. When she tried to muster even a defiant thought, the neural dampeners cracked her resolve with jarring jolts, like lightning striking bone. Time lost meaning. She thought she had endured 7 days, already 7 eternities, but now, adrift in the plasma's violet glow, she could neither count the hours nor distinguish them. Her muscles trembled uncontrollably. A thin strand of drool traced down her cheek. Her uniform was nothing more than rags, clinging to her like the memory of dignity long since torn away. Then, just as oblivion beckoned, the chamber shuddered. The crystal walls quivered, and the prism overhead shivered. Ka's mandibles clicked in confusion. Ilara tasted copper in her mouth as the violet plasma rippled with sudden turbulence. Alarms began to wail harsh, metallic keening that rattled the quartz. Emergency lights snapped from violet to searing scarlet. For the first time in days, Ilara felt a spark of something unmistakable. Hope. The Draken froze, their instruments hanging mid-scan. The floor's gravity anchors loosened just enough for her to sag against them, sensation flooding back into her limbs. Through blurred vision, she saw Ka hesitate, uncertainty flickering in those cold, multifaceted eyes. And in that suspended moment, between utter despair and the promise of rescue, Ilara realized that her torment might finally reach its end. The alarms grew deafening, echoing through the halls of questioning, and somewhere beyond the quartz walls, fate was stirring. Lieutenant Jace Rourke slammed his hand against the console as alarms reverberated through the stealth shuttle. The cockpit's cramped hull rattled with every blast from the Draken defense turrets outside. He stole a final glance at the hollow projection of Alara's face, pale, terrified, and pleading, etched into his mind by the encrypted transmission he'd intercepted. There had been no briefing, no backup orders, only a single driving truth. She was in hell, and he was her only hope. A shuddering lurch. The shuttle pierced the outer hull of the Draken facility. Jace toggled the grav stabilizers to slam mode, sending him forward as the ship tore through a maintenance tunnel. Sparks cascaded from breached conduits, painting the corridor in flickering sepia light. He rose from his pilot's seat, Namatag still affixed to his scorched uniform, J. Rourke. Above his heart, the insignia of the United Earth Federation, a promise he dared now to break. Armed with a prototype destabilizer rifle salvaged from a black market arms cache, Jace pivoted on one heel and fired. The beam seared through the first pair of Draken sentries like overcharged lightning, collapsing their spindly frames into writhing piles of chitin. He ducked beneath another volley, ducking into the shadow of a maintenance alcove. His breath came in ragged gasps. Anger, fear, guilt. Each memory of Alara's laughter spurred him onward. Each anguished scream she might have uttered drove him faster. He navigated the labyrinth of corridors by hacked schematics and frantic hunches. At every junction patrolled hover drones sleek, orb-like machines with scanning arrays, yet he dispatched them with silent EMP charges. The facility's turbolifts loomed like glass cages. Instead of waiting for the lift, Jace pried the power conduit and used the magnetic grapplers on his boots to scale the shaft. Sparks showered as he ripped open access panels, overriding door. Locks with improvised code splicers rigged to his wrist console. Deeper into the heart of the facility, the air turned acrid with the smell of ozone and burned circuits. His HUD pinged an energy signature matching the neural dampeners he'd studied in stolen Dracon research. According to his intel, that signature lingered in the violet halls of questioning. He rounded a corner and nearly collided with a Dracon patrol. Tall silhouettes backlit by scarlet emergency lights. Without hesitation, Jace hurled a thermal grenade. The shockwave appended the ends, and he sprinted past their stilled forms. Adrenaline lending speed to his legs dotted last. He stood before the reinforced quartz doors of the interrogation chamber. The translucent crystal glowed with that horrible violet light, and he could already hear the faint echo of Alara's ragged breathing. There was no time. He planted a microcharger at the lock's junction box, heart hammering as he set the timer. With a guttural thump, the doors exploded inward, fractures spiderwebbing across the crystal, and Jace Rourke stormed through the shards of light and sound, rifle leveled at the horror within. There, suspended above the plasma pool, was Alara, her body arched in torment, eyes closed against pain. Zyrka and his guards whirled at the intrusion. Jace squeezed the trigger. The destabilizer beam tore through the gravity anchors, sending Alara tumbling into his arms. For a breathless moment, everything stilled. Pain, fury, desperation then. The Draken roared, and the fight erupted anew. But Jace didn't hesitate. Clutching Alara to his chest, he plunged down the corridor, every reckless step a vow to carry her back to safety. Jace's boots pounded against the metal grating as alarms shrieked around them. Alara sagged in his arms, every breath fragile and shallow. Behind them, corridors shuddered with secondary explosions, his time charges ripping sections of the facility apart, sealing off Draken reinforcements. Sparks rained down like shooting stars as a fuel conduit ruptured, igniting a cascade of fire along the walls. Almost there, Jace rasped, blood and soot smearing his cheek. He ducked under a tilted support beam, half carrying, half supporting Alara's weight. Her eyes fluttered open, pupils dilated with pain and relief. "Jace," she whispered, her voice a fragile thread. She, he murmured, pressing a finger to her lips. We're getting out. A fusillade of plasma bolts streaked down the corridor, sizzling as they struck metal. Jace pivoted, firing blind in all directions, creating a buffer of glowing arcs between them and the pursuing Draken. Each bolt he sent back bought them precious seconds. Up ahead, the docking bay doors' massive hexagonal slabs of alloy began to part. Jace reached the control panel, hacked and smoking, its indicator lights flickering. He slammed his palm across the override sensor. With a grinding roar, the doors slid open, revealing the docked stealth shuttle, its hull scarred but flight-worthy. Jace half-lifted, half-dragged Alara toward the ramp. Behind them, the facility convulsed. Tremors shook the crystalline walls, and streams of molten crystal dripped onto the floor. The Dracum soldiers hesitated at the threshold, eyes wide as the very structure turned against them. We don't have much time, Jace yelled, hauling Alara up the ramp and into the shuttle's hold. He slammed the hatch shut just as the last Dracon guard lunged, but the reinforced door sealed with a hiss, cutting off the alien's claws. Alara collapsed onto the cabin floor, delirious. Jace crouched beside her, ripping off his jacket to cushion her head. You're safe now, he vowed, brushing a strand of blood-matted hair from her forehead. The cockpit door slid open, and Jace burst through, firing up the console. The shuttle trembled as he engaged the retro thrusters, fighting the base's destabilizing gravity fields. Warning lights blinked. Structural integrity, power reserves, hull breach warnings. Still, with a judder and a roar, the shuttle tore free from the docking clamps shot through the viewport. Jace watched the facility implode. Crystalline support beams snapped inward, and the entire structure collapsed into a core detonation that blossomed violet-hot against the void. The shockwave rattled the shuttle's skeleton, but it held together. Alara, Jace whispered, returning to her side. She lay pale and trembling, but alive. He pressed a medic stimpack to her arm, injecting nanits that would stabilize her vitals. Her breathing evened. Her eyelids fluttered closed. Why did you risk everything? She murmured, fighting the edges of consciousness. He smiled, half in pain, half in triumph. You're my mission, Alara. Always have been. Her hand found his, fingers weakly curling around his. For a moment, they drifted together in silence. The hum of the shuttle's life support their only company. The stars stretched before them. Like promises, Jay set a course for the nearest Federation outpost, plotting a vector that grazed the Dracum blockade before diving into a nebula cloud. The sensors would be scrambled for hours, enough time to reach safety dot as the nebulas. Glowing gas enveloped the shuttle. Alara sat up, wincing but determined. You saved me, she said, voice steadier now. I thought I'd never see you again. Jay shrugged, his bravado returning. Told you, didn't I? I'm not the careful type. She managed a laugh, soft and shaky. He caught it in his heart like sunlight. No, she agreed, leaning against him. You're not. Outside, the nebulous tendrils slid past the viewport emeralds and sapphires drifting in cosmic depths. Inside, hope and love rekindled two battered souls. In that reckless act of defiance, they had torn freedom from the jaws of despair. The journey back would be long, and her wounds would heal slowly. But together, survivors of a week of darkness, they would face the dawn, and no force in the galaxy could break them. Again,